Hello YouTube, Jeff Steele here. Today's video topic is on what it feels like to get shot and my story from my perspective on how I was shot with a firearm. Now disclosure, never try this at home, and this story is not meant to compete with other people's stories. There's always going to be a bigger, better, more intense, more gruesome story on this topic. Not trying to compete with anybody, just going to tell my story from my perspective on my experience with the topic. So growing up, I used to spend a lot of time on my grandparents' farm in North Georgia. Parents were working, grandparents were retired, just where I spent a lot of my younger years on up through 16 and 18, spent a lot of time. And it's where I first started shooting firearms and started hunting. It was with my grandfather. And we always use safe practices the majority of the time. But on occasion, we would find ourselves into some questionable or mischievous undertakings. So one day we were in my grandfather's shop. He had a very large, or has a very large shop, probably 6 or 7 bays. He had part of it's a woodworking shop, and part of it was automotive type shop. But it was me, my grandfather, and my grandmother's brother, my great uncle Jimmy. We called him Jimbo. Now Jimbo was deaf, so you never really could understand what he was saying, but he understood what was going on. He wasn't dumb, he couldn't clearly enunciate his speech, but he was a smart individual. And my grandfather was pretty smart as well, and I was about 12 or 14 years old, somewhere in that age range. And why we did this and followed through with it, I'm not real sure. I guess we didn't think of the potential risks that could have happened, and we just followed through, and what happened happened. So there was this cabinet in the building that had some old corroded shotgun shells. I have an example here. This is an old corroded shotgun shell. Now, a shotgun shell has brass around here usually, and a 209 primer that usually has a little bit of gunpowder in the primer. And then there's a large charge of powder here, and there's usually a plastic wad inside this part of the casing that holds the small pellets or BBs. And I think in this particular scenario it was a 12 gauge shell for sure. What I have here is a 20 gauge, which is a little bit smaller. But it was a 12 gauge, and it had birdshot, probably 7.5, 8 ounce, or number 8 shot. So these old corroded shells, we don't want to fire them through a shotgun just because they're corroded. We don't really want to put this rust in our clean shotguns. So we got the idea, well, we'll take a pocket knife like so, and we'll cut a little ring around the top of the shell, and we'll cut out all the shot. So all that's left in the shot is the primer here. And then we got the charge of powder, which comes up to about halfway on the shell. So then we got the idea, we'll take a pellet gun, and this is the exact pellet gun that I used on that day. We'll take a pellet gun, and this is a 177 caliber pellet, which is very small. It's a very small projectile. We'll take that pellet rifle with that pellet, and what we did after we cut out the shot, we placed it on an old paint bucket, probably 10, 15 yards from the front of the building. And our idea was to take the pellet rifle, shoot the primer, and have the shell explode. Now we were just looking for something to shoot to go boom. We weren't thinking anything outside of that, what the risk, what could potentially happen from this. We didn't think any of that. We just did and followed through. Now my grandfather has grew up in the North Georgia mountains, been around guns his whole life, fought in World War II, was in Germany. All the time I knew him, I never seen him lose his cool. Nothing really ever got him excited. There would be a super stressful situation. He'd be cool as a cucumber, no matter what. So maybe that's one of the reasons he didn't think much about what could happen. We just carried on. So with that said, I start shooting at the shell on the paint bucket. And I must take 10, 15 shots. It's not the most accurate pellet rifle in the world. I mean, I just couldn't hit this tiny little primer on this shotgun shell at 15 yards, which is extremely small. And so I'm shooting 10, 15 times, and every shot I have to break the barrel, which takes a little bit of effort. And finally, I lose my patience. I stand up, because I'm lying down, about head level off the ground with this paint bucket trying to shoot this shotgun shell. So I walk up, take the pellet rifle, and I put the barrel right to the end of the shotgun shell, and I pull the trigger, and kaboom, it explodes. And it was quite an explosion. It was a 12 gauge shotgun shell, point blank range, right there in front of me, boom. Now, I am wearing nothing but a white cotton t-shirt, and I have on a pair of Levi's denim jeans. And as soon as the explosion happens, I felt the impact, and I knew I was hit right away. And after 1 or 2 seconds, I jumped back, and I realized I'm hit in the groin area, somewhere in that region. And I just instantly felt just this impact and pressure and all of a sudden numbness all over my groin, and from about my groin down to say knee level. So, and at that point I knew something bad has happened, and I just went into extreme shock and worry at the same time. So my first immediate action was I ran around the side of the building, pulled my britches down to my ankles, and started inspecting all my man gear, make sure everything's okay, looking for blood. Because at that point, within 5 or 10 seconds, I realized I was hit in that area. And whatever it was that came back and hit me, the projectile hit me right in the shaft of the Johnson. Now, I checked everything out. All I could tell was it basically just broke the skin in one area. No huge damage, thank God. I've never felt more lucky in my entire life. Now, this was a 12 gauge shotgun shell. Now, the actual projectile that hit me, I don't know if it was the actual pellet. Now, there was no ricochet. This was immediate impact. So when it exploded, that projectile came directly at me and hit me. It was not ricocheted off of anything. Now, it was either the pellet, which is my best guess as to what came back at me, or my next thought was it could have been the primer itself that blew out of the back of the shotgun shell and hit me. It was one of those two things. I don't know to this day. My best guess is it was the pellet, but it was one or the other, the pellet or the primer. Now, I think the only thing that saved my manhood from that situation, I mentioned I had on a pair of thick denim shorts. They were Levi's, I remember. Faded out blue Levi's. The projectile hit dead center of the zipper. So it went clean through, blew a clear hole right through this top layer. It busted the brass zipper, and then also went through the back layer of denim. So it went through 2 layers of denim. It busted through the brass zipper, and I had on, I think, a pair of flannel boxers. Went through both layers of flannel right there where the zipper is. So it went through at least 4 layers of thick, solid fabric, busted through a brass zipper, and hit me right on the Johnson shaft. Now, I don't know how lucky that is. I mean, there was definitely someone looking out over me for sure that day. I mean, I think that's one of the most lucky moments in my life, no doubt about it. But I remember for at least 30 minutes to an hour, the whole area of my groin was just numb, completely numb. And at the same time, the transition as far as moving into the burning and the stinging in the exact area started to set in. But that initial burning and stinging sensation, that didn't start till probably 30, 40 minutes after the initial impact. But that initial impact, it was just numb, the impact. So that's the first sensation I felt, was just completely numbness from that impact. And then the sting and the burning started to set in. Now, this is extremely lucky, and this is my story. I thought it would be something entertaining, something interesting, something true that I wanted to share with you all. And I would like for you all to comment. Have you had any type of related experiences with being shot by an actual firearm? I would be very interested to know. And share this video, get the word out. Know that you have to be careful when performing such things. I mean, there's definitely YouTube sites out there that do crazy things such as this, but they usually do it from quite a distance, 50, 100 yards plus. They don't do anything such as that up at close range, and if they do, they're usually wearing a whole lot of protective gear. Like I said, I had nothing but underwear, denim shorts, and a t-shirt on that day. But I thought about this a few days ago. I wanted to share the story. I think the last time I told this story was at my grandfather's funeral, which was last November. So it's been just over a year since he passed away. But the crowd got kind of a laugh out of it. But I remember right when I ran around the building, I dropped my britches. I was checking everything out. I remember here come my grandpa and my Uncle Jimbo running around behind me. And they're just cool as can be. I'm in panic mode. My brain's running a mile a second, and they're just calm as ever, like nothing ever happened. I never will forget that day. But I hope you enjoyed the video. This was my story. Please comment on it, share the video, tap the thumbs up icon, the bell icon, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Thank you for watching. Have a nice evening.